Hi, welcome back. In our previous lesson, we looked at some practice questions on income and substitution effect. Today, we'll be moving on to Hicksian versus Slutsky's decomposition of income and substitution effect. In our previous lessons, we decomposed the total effect of a price change on quantity demand into income and substitution effect. Let's use this figure here to recap what we have learned so far. Suppose we start from an initial equilibrium point E1 where the demand for good X was X1. We have said that if the price of good X increases, it would decrease the quantity demand of good X from X1 to X2. This is the total effect. This total effect can be decomposed into substitution and income effect. What the substitution effect is the difference between X1 and XC, and the income effect is the difference between XC and X2. Notice that when we were isolating the substitution effect, our aim was to keep the consumer on the same level of utility or indifference curve, U1, despite the change in price. So we did this by drawing an imaginary budget line BC, which is parallel to the new budget line B2, reflecting the change in the relative prices, and tangential to the original indifference curve U1. Now, this is the Hicksian method of decomposing the total effect into substitution and income effect. So the Hicksian method measures real income based on the utility of the consumer. Hence, if we want to isolate the substitution effect while holding the income effect constant, all we had to do was to find the change in quantity demanded resulting from changing the price while simultaneously compensating the individual with enough income so that they could afford the same level of utility. Unlike Hicksian method, the Slutsky method defines real income in terms of purchasing power. That is how much the consumer can purchase. So when isolating the substitution effect using the Slutsky method, our aim will be to find the change in quantity demanded resulting from changing the price while simultaneously compensating the individual with enough income so that they can afford the original bundle. To see this, let's analyze this figure here. So if we start from the original bundle E1 on budget line B1 and indifference curve U1, suppose the price of X increase moving the consumer to bundle E2 on budget line B2 on indifference curve U2. So this implies a reduction in the quantity demand of good X from X1 to X2. So this change, as we know, is the total effect of the price change. To find the substitution effect, we will be holding the income effect constant. Since Slutsky measures real income in terms of how much the consumer can buy, then holding income effect constant simply means keeping the consumer on the original bundle E1. In this case, our imaginary budget line, which is BC, and it reflects the change in the relative price and compensated income, it will cut through the original bundle E1. So we can see that this new BC here, it cuts through the original bundle E1 at this point. Now, the essence of this is to make sure that the original bundle can be afforded at the new prices. The fact that the original bundle can be afforded at the new price doesn't mean that the consumer has to stay on that original bundle E1. Given this budget, if there is any other bundle that will give the consumer a higher level of utility, he will choose this other bundle. Now we see in our figure here that though bundle EC lies on the same budget line as E1, it moves the consumer to a higher indifference curve, which is UC, and gives the consumer a higher utility. We know that the movement from E1 to EC in this case, or the movement from X1 to XC, is our substitution effect, and the movement from XC to X2, or from bundle EC to bundle E2, is our income effect. So the difference between the Hicksian and the Slutsky method is that Hicksian measures real income in terms of utility. So the aim is to keep the consumer on the same level of utility even though prices have changed. Slutsky measures real income in terms of purchasing power, which is how much you can buy. So the aim is to make sure that even though the prices of the good have changed, the consumer can still afford the original bundle, which is E1 in this case. So this is all that we have on our lesson on Hicksian versus Slutsky decomposition of substitution and income effect. Our next lesson will be on deriving the Marshallian, Hicksian, and Slutsky demand curves. If you enjoyed today's lesson, consider subscribing. Thank you.